In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about investment and two lessons. The first of which is don't buy garbage. And there's a difference between buying something which is undervalued and it has good fundamentals, but it's fallen on hard times. But if you're honest, you know there's going to come a time when it's going to bounce back. There's a difference between that and just FOMOing into something which doesn't have any fundamentals. There's no foundational intrinsic value, and you just go into it because you're hoping that you can make a gamble and the gamble will pay off. Ultimately, water always finds its level. And if you buy garbage, eventually playing with fire will burn you. And yeah, you might come out ahead. It's totally possible. But there's no floor because you just don't know when the Ponzi scheme is going to essentially be over and you are going to be left holding the bag. That's not a good place to be in. And so one thing I have learned as I've dabbled in investment is that you don't want to buy into euphoria. You don't want to jump into something just because it's going up and everyone is trying to get in on the action. Because when you buy into the mountaintop experience, then oftentimes there's nowhere to go but down. Just look at a stock chart where you have good companies, but maybe they spiked in value and then they went down dramatically. There's a lot of them like that. And maybe they are good companies, but that doesn't change the fact that maybe a lot of people bought into them when their share price was $12 and now it's $3. So even if it's a good company, that's one heck of a bounce you're going to need to get from that $3 back into the money if you bought in at 12. At that point, you basically just have to accept the truth that you lost your money. So I really firmly believe you don't want to buy into things when there's a lot of hype and when people are super excited about it and when everyone is talking about it and it's the big buzz. Like right now, there's so much buzz around AI and stuff like that. So everybody's been jumping into stocks like Nvidia, and you see a stock go from $400 to $1,200 in just maybe 3 months or something. And that's not something you can really have any assurance is going to stay there. It might double again. It might go back down dramatically. You just don't know. But Warren Buffett said, you know, buy things like Wrigley's chewing gum and Fruit of the Loom underwear, because no matter how much change happens in the world, people are still gonna need underwear and they're still gonna chew gum. And that's just really obvious and it's true. But then that goes back to the other thing I was talking about: don't buy garbage. Now, maybe Coca-Cola and the underwear company and the chewing gum company aren't the sexiest investments out there, but they're also companies that you trust. They're companies that you probably give your own money to as a customer. So if you are honest, you're going to look at these companies and say, well, that's a good company. I know it's a good company. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to go out of business. But just to give you an example of this, I bought some shares of Big Lots. And I just did this because they missed earnings and their stock price fell dramatically. And I thought, well, I'll buy a little bit of that and maybe it'll rally a little bit and then I can sell it for a quick profit. And I knew I was buying garbage. I knew, like, okay, I'll tell you right now, there's not any reason in the world why I would want to go shop at a Big Lots when there is a Walmart next door. Like, the only thing Big Lots maybe kind of has as a advantage over a store like Walmart is they have a nice furniture department. I mean, not really nice, but probably better than Walmart. But everything else is basically just like a smaller version of the same kind of junk you'd get at Walmart, only the presentation is worse and the selection is smaller. So when you look at this and you see this company, it's missing its earnings, it's not doing very well, and you just give it kind of a smell test, you know, this company ain't doing very good. It's not going to be something I'd want to bet on long term. And then, of course, if you follow the news, you'd know Big Lots is now saying that they're going to potentially have to close stores and they're at risk of bankruptcy. So their stock has fallen even more. So when I heard that news, I got out of it. And you know, it is what it is. I shouldn't have bought it. That's the truth. And I didn't lose that much. I lost a little bit. But I also have to look at the truth and say, okay, if I make a stupid call, then I got to take ownership of that. I'd rather take a small loss and just get out of it and say, okay, that's a mistake I won't make again. Versus ride it all the way to the bottom, because at this point I have no idea what it's going to do. It might rally again, you never know, but it also could go pretty much to zero. And so you just got to look at the intrinsic value of things. And I don't even think it's so much about looking into, you know, technicals behind the scenes or diving into something that's extremely technical or advanced. It's just about asking yourself the honest question: do you think that this is going to be around for another decade? Do you think, does this seem like a successful enterprise? Does this seem like something which has value? And very, very often, if something seems like it's legit, it probably is. If people seem like they're trustworthy, they potentially are. If they seem like they're shady, very seldom do you find a situation where somebody seems like they're shady as hell, and then you find out down the road, oh, they actually weren't. Usually, if you trust your gut, you're gonna be pretty spot on. That first impression is usually pretty accurate. And we get into the biggest trouble in our lives and investment and so many different things when we ignore what our heart's telling us is true because we don't really want to believe it. Or we think we're going to get ahead by jumping into something which we know doesn't have good fundamentals. And we know it, and then we get into it anyway. We ignore the red flags, we jump in because it seems like potentially we could make a quick profit of some kind in the wrong way. Don't buy garbage. If you know that something isn't right, don't jump into it. And don't jump into the hype either, because there's always going to be people who are saying you have to jump in on this thing, some big new thing that is going to be revolutionary. Don't jump in on that. Even if it's good, then potentially wait, because eventually the hype is going to die off, and then you can buy back in when things have settled down and you can actually get a fair value. Patience is usually a good thing, and sometimes we struggle with patience because it always feels like you gotta figure it all out right now, and the truth is quite often you gotta calm down even more when something feels like it's important, when it feels like you really need a breakthrough, you need something to fall into place like that. That's the time, I think, when you gotta just calm down. You gotta kind of take it slower. You gotta say, okay, in the darkest hour, that's when I have to be serenely calm. Because if you freak out and you're always trying to find the next piece of action that's going to fix your problems, quite often you go from one bad situation to another, which is even worse. That could be true in finances if you're jumping from one bad investment to the next, or it could be true in relationships if you're jumping from one bad relationship to the next. Things that really matter, it's okay to take time on them and not jump and try to close on a solution too rapidly. And things which are true today will probably be true in the future, which means you don't have to worry too much about missing an opportunity. There's always going to be people that are trying to make you believe if you don't move on this right now, if you don't buy into it this afternoon, you're going to miss out on the opportunity of a lifetime. But you know, the truth is, most of the time, you don't really need to move that fast. So don't be afraid to practice active patience and wait for a time when all the pieces fall into play seamlessly and until you really feel good about the decision that you're making, whatever that is. Prudence is always important. You don't want to be rash. You also don't want to be somebody who holds forever, you know? There's these people that'll say you have to just hold on for dear life and never, ever move on from something. I think that that's also something probably not right, because you can't be so attached to something that you aren't objective about it. So I think it's good not to be, don't be too attached to anything, because when you get super attached to something, then you stop looking at the truth. And if you make a bad call, you should be detached from it enough to acknowledge it and then figure out maybe to move on so that you can limit your losses. Or if there's something that's better for you to be putting time and energy into, you should be willing to look beyond the things you currently are focused on so that you can maybe open yourself to new and better opportunities. But in all things you do, always remember, buy things which have value. And if you don't think that something has value, or it doesn't look like it quite has value, or your first impression is that you don't trust it, then move on. Because if you don't listen to your inner voice on that, you probably, more often than not, will regret it. In any case, always good luck on your adventures. Till next time, thanks for watching.